Hey RJ.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. How's it going?
Good, real good.
Good deal. I'm from Illinois. I don't know if you want to volunteer whereabouts, vaguely, even where you're from.
I'm I'm currently in the Northwest.
Oh, cool. Cool.
However, my entire experience is in the southern United States.
I'm guessing you're. What do you mean by experience? I took a brief
Oh,
look
I'm
at
sorry.
your.
I'm sorry. My work experience is in law enforcement. It's on the state, local, and federal level with DHS. Um, and it dealt with border security, which included smuggling of all sorts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. How long were you in the biz, for lack of better?
20 years.
20 years. Wow. Okay. Damn. And how did you get into the biz? Like, for lack of better words, were you just always like into the idea, or how'd you find yourself in law enforcement?
I, having seen some worthless police work as a child, I inspired me My dad was one of those guys that says, if you think you can do it better, do it.
Yeah, and I
And
hope I'm not. I'm saying this, don't smack my hand, but
no, no,
worthless police work, like a situation like almost like an Uncle Ben on Spider-Man, where they like didn't, or like
lazy,
what? What's that?
lazy, lazy,
Okay, gotcha,
very lazy. Yeah,
gotcha. So you got inspired to get into law enforcement because you saw some lazy cop work.
correct.
Gotcha. And I'm just
As a
curious. I
child,
take.
as a
Go ahead.
young child.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So I had just heard a little bit of the chat that we were just in, and I don't want to get too much into that because I feel like if people listen to this, they won't have any idea what the hell we're talking about. So I thought maybe it would be better to just talk about. It sounds like maybe you're, and I don't want to assume, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're like opposed to the idea of cannabis legalization, maybe.
Very much so.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And is there what why let me just start with why. I'm curious why.
Well, let's clear it up. I mean, one of the things we covered over there that we need to cover here is that not for medical use. I'm open minded. I want people to find relief. Even possibly I could find relief from it. So it has take medical off the table. I fully support that. Um, However, everything outside of that, and that should be as regulated as opioids, as regulated as opioids. Um, but
As regulated as opioids now, right, is what you
correct,
mean.
correct,
Yeah,
correct, correct, correct. But everything else should stay as it is, in my opinion.
it should remain like completely criminal to just simply possess.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I think where we're at is a great place for this country right now. State by state, um, there's not you're not going to find a state around that's going to make a felony out of simple possession. It's usually time served, maybe a fine, first offense, and that's that. You want to continue down the road, I think it's going to take usually about 10, 15, 20 times of being um arrested for it that you're going to start looking at an increased penalty, maybe 30 days in jail
Yeah, for simple possession is what you're talking
for
about.
simple possession. And that's just somebody who, again, if you have a medical excuse, and we know how easy that is. I mean, how many former retired cops are using it? I mean, most doctors, you can find a physician somewhere, a doctor shop that will help you get through that door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what what about cannabis makes you feel this way? We have other, and I'm sure you've been asked this question before, other
Yeah.
drugs that I'm not even going to go to the links that some people say. Some people will say, "Oh, they're much more harmful than cannabis." That's not even my point.
No, no.
Just we just have other drugs, and we have this, I thought, idea in America where it's like, civil liberties, what you do in your own home, type of thing. Why do you take this particular stance with cannabis, or do you believe other drugs should
And
be
see
illegal?
that's kind of a misnomer right now, because if you are, I mean, there are probably what tens and tens of thousands of folks right now, Americans right now, that are smoking marijuana in their home undetected. No one knows.
And look, I agree with actually that point.
And no one's kicking
But
in your door. You will not get a search warrant as an officer.
you could say the same thing though about many other horrible
Sure.
things. I guess my point I wanted to extend, because again, you make a very fair point. I want to give you that, but I'm saying like you took it to the extent of if I get pulled over, like why even that? Like if I'm not doing anything wrong and I'm just simply in possession of cannabis, why do you take that
So
stance?
I subscribe to the broken windows theory. Most successful officers, agents out there will also do so, and what that means. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not. I'm
Okay, it
not.
means that the small focus on the smallest, lowest level possible crime, and that'll tamp down the bigger crime. And it's been proven correct over and over again. So the point is that if somehow inadvertently you are in, let's say you are in an unrelated traffic accident, and in the process of my investigation, I'm pulling your driver's license, your registration, your insurance. I'm looking to see who did what, and I look inside your car and I see a marijuana joint. It's unrelated. I have no suspicion that you're currently intoxicated. However, I caught you. Now, this is a very, very unusual, very, very rare event for all these stars to align in such a fashion. That also puts on notice to other folks out there that look, hey, I need to keep this to my house. I need to keep this. If I'm doing this, illicitly, it's tamping down the bigger picture. Now, by actually legalizing it, there's none of that. And that's what we see. We're seeing this in like California. Look at Oregon right now. We're seeing this in states that have gone full legalization, which is why some states are starting to backtrack now. It's out of control. We do not have a way as law enforcement to easily and readily examine you to see if you're on an intoxicant when you're in public.
And
We
but
we
I don't
we
think that's alone to cannabis. I mean, I heard you say earlier that
correct.
alcohol is pretty
Correct.
easy.
Most folks, thankfully, shy away from harder substances. However, there is a draw to marijuana. It's just marijuana. It's just marijuana, um, and that makes it a much more desired intoxicant, similar to alcohol. But unlike alcohol, again, I generally need a search warrant to be more invasive to draw fluids from your body. And that is not something that's appreciated by the courts at this time. So those who are pro marijuana, as you heard, as we were discussing in another as we were talking in another discussion, they want to put the cart before the horse. They want to get it out there before the system is ready to respond and manage it.
I think I think to an extent I understand what you're saying, but
Does that make sense? I was
also
going to say, am I making sense here?
I would also just say that to your last point, it is already out there, and
It is, and we're having a hell of a time with it. A hell of a time.
but
Um,
I guess what I'm saying is if you point out some failures in regulation, and I actually tend to agree with the California point you made. The Oregon point I think is a little bit more nuanced, but yeah, people aren't. I don't think anybody's gotten regulation of it correct.
no,
They've focused more on licensing and how to make people money instead of actually
right,
regulating the product so
right.
that it is quote unquote safe. Now, I want to say, I said the reason I said quote unquote safe is because like smoking anything or taking any drug at all is. I was taught you were young, drugs aren't good, right? So I'm not saying any drug is quote unquote safe, but making sure that there's not heavy metals in it, mold, simple things like making sure it's labeled accurately states are failing at. And you'd think like that's rule number one, make sure it's labeled accurately and doesn't contain foreign substances, for lack of better words. um
And that's a
contain
good thing. We don't want anyone getting hurt, right? On any level, whether
you
it's
yeah, right,
whether it's a person on the street or a person in their own home. We don't want that.
right. I don't know, the weird intersection for me, because it sounds like and if you can't already tell, I'm one of the more reasonable ones. And in fact, on my if you want to call me that, on my podcast, I've had some of the number one groups that lobby against legalization. I have them on my podcast quite frequently. They're some of my most returning guests because I find conversations like these to be a little bit refreshing. I know that we may not agree on everything, but I also find that we don't disagree on everything either.
Right, right.
Um, so I don't know. I'm just curious. Like again, I am honestly fascinated. Like what? So you made I like heard you out on the intoxicate. I just don't get why you're saying it has to stay at. So are you saying? Let me understand this correctly. You're saying you are fine with it if people keep it within their home.
I'm fine with it as it is right now. See, it's tamped down right now. Folks are when they keep it in their home right now, unless you're in like a place like Oregon, California, Washington, New York, places where it's just wide open. What I mean by people keeping it in their home is not that the law has to say that, it's that they feel that way. See, they
Mm,
feel that way because they feel the pressure from the law within their respective jurisdiction, wherever they live. For
yeah.
example, like I said, I worked for in the South. It's very strict in the South, Florida aside, and it's loosening up everywhere through this country. So even when I say that, it's just more strict than say the East or West Coast. But folks feel in the South in that area that hey, I want to do this. It's my body, and you're not going to stop me. It's just a joint. Me and my wife, after the kids go to bed, we're going to light up and I'm going to do it quietly in my house while watching a movie. And they do that because the pressures from the community, from the law, push them to do that. So what I'm fine with that. Now, we go ahead and we make a law for that, that changes everything because it's giving a blessing that hey, this is good. And I'm telling you what human nature is well, you're right, but I was transporting it to my house now. So now I'm going to do it in the park. We as humans, I'm sure you'll agree with this. As humans, we can't enough is never enough. We always have to go to the next level it seems like. And that's the problem with these things that maintain a decent society. And that's really isn't that what we're all after? I mean, we want to have a society for our kids and our grandkids.
Yeah, and I to your point, I think that with and I'm curious your opinions on like other drugs like alcohol and tobacco, like whether you feel that they should like stay in the home. You know what I mean? Is do you feel that way about alcohol and
No,
tobacco?
no, but I think the thing that gets missed in these discussions is that how much alcohol and tobacco has hurt our society. I myself,
I agree. Actually,
I,
yeah.
I myself, I enjoy a good pipe, a great cigar, and a whiskey. And in fact, I wish you and I were together right now. We'd be sitting in my little smoking area there, and we'd have a cigar and a whiskey or a bourbon together. I enjoy those things. I think that those are a release, and actually, in the reality of our situation in this country right now is most Americans have gone far, far beyond tobacco and alcohol. I can't recall an interaction I've had with someone as an officer that they didn't have prescription drugs with them. I mean, they say Xanax is one of the is so prevalent that there's more people with some sort of mood altering prescription from a doctor than without.
Right.
So I mean, we're all as Americans. It seems like we're all going after something. But for some reason, with marijuana, there's this drive right now to just open up the gates. Just let it be. And in the last discussion that we were part of, you and I, that we were witness to, there was a discussion. You always notice that they throw the children, and then they throw the farmers. I mean, this is like so many other slippery slopes that we've seen in this country. Everything goes, they throw everything at
Yeah.
the
No,
wall.
no offense to them, but that I don't even think they're worth discussing. Because I
Yep.
completely agree with some of the talking points, and I'm
Anyone
get.
anyone who's streetwise knows when you're being sold something.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Or the whole I thought the history recap was let's just say interesting,
Yes.
maybe not
Yes.
based in accuracy, but again, no diss, total I'm saying that respectfully for those people because if I didn't give them actual feedback that I find that disrespectful, like I like to tell people the truth anyways. quick question, and then I want to wrap up around to the question that I was. This is kind of a joke question here in the middle, so just to laugh.
Okay.
But then to get back to the point I was like kind of leading up to. If we were together, like you were just saying right now, um, would you let me like smoke weed with you? Maybe not in your house, since you
Yeah, not
described being in
not
your house.
not in my
But
house. It's this is the misnomer with a lot of folks in my business. We're not out to crush a good time. That's not the goal. The
yeah,
goal is an orderly society, a society that regular folks can operate in. So, you know, I over the years I've had neighbors, and it floats over the fence.
sure.
Um, I'm not raising. No one is out there trying to ruin. It has been so decriminalized. There's very. I mean, you're going to find like maybe your guy straight out of boot camp is going to get all wound around the axle about this stuff. That's not the goal here. The goal is not to make you look like the devil, to make you look like an awful human being. That the opposite. It's just about maintaining some sort of decorum and order in a society. That's all it
Yeah,
is. And right now we have a very hard time uh, picking this up and monitoring it when you're out in public. Again, it almost always comes down to drawing your blood. Well, that's not something I can do very easily. Do you see the
right.
problem
To
with
me,
that?
that's well, actually, yes and no,
Yeah.
because if you're saying you can't detect it and you can't tell, then are they really that intoxicated?
Well, they are. They're enough to have bad judgment. They're enough to have slow reflexes. Maybe they're just ultra comfortable. I've seen that many times. And again, that's when if you're sitting on the couch with your wife, ha- you know, you do you, boo. But you know, you're driving down the street. That's not good. That's not right. That's not.
Yeah, I agree
And I
with you on
can't
that.
stop it. I can't. I'm telling you right now. If God forbid this happens with your family and they're a victim, I, I I've been there. I've been in front of you. I've been the guy who's got to tell you, and you're like, do something about this. And it's like, I can't. There's we've decriminalized it. I can't. I cannot do something. So
Well, I don't think. I mean, in at least in Illinois, we have that's where like I said, I don't know if I said that already, but I'm from. We have a per se limit, and I know like states like Colorado do as well, where like you say, if you're especially if you're in an accident,
right,
you will get a bio sample taken. And actually, there's a headline story in Illinois that I covered a few months ago, but now it's kind of just getting picked up by other media. Uh, Not to take a tangent, but the University of Illinois is involved in testing some of the biometric or the fluids, for lack of better words, from people, and they're being accused right now. Like basically, the tests they gave were fraudulent. They like over 1,600 cases. They were saying people were intoxicated and they weren't. And now, I'm not using that's not even that's a throwaway point that has. I'm not even looking to like necessarily debate that. The point I was really trying to make is to your point of there's nothing you can do. I don't know which, I'm certain maybe there's some states that don't have the per se limit, but I feel like usually when states don't have a per se limit, which is it's the same concept of point oh 0.08. So it's not saying you can't have none in your system, but you can't have enough to be quote unquote intoxicated. And I guess my point is like, is that really true? That last thing you said, is that really true? Like, because I hear people getting charged with intoxicated driving and murder all the, or like the, I don't mean to say murder, but
I'm
you
with you.
just described a situation of DUI, hitting somebody.
What I mean is that I can't unring the bell of the person who's been harmed. It's done. They've been
Fair.
harmed. They're in the hospital or worse. I can't unring that. It had happened. Um, no, every state, if there's a permanent injury or death involved, we're going to draw blood. That's not,
Right.
I'm sorry, I came across the wrong way there, but that
No, no, I get what you're saying
yeah,
now.
I can't, and that's, see, when I have to look in your eyes and say, something happened to your mom or your dad, I can't undo that harm. And then the next thing is, well, how did we get to this point? Well, we got to this point because so many folks look at marijuana like it's nothing. It's nothing, and never in the recent history of our country, or the history of the world, has marijuana been as strong as it is now. And so it we have minimalized its use, and then it's stronger than it's ever been. You see what I'm saying?
I
Is that making
yeah,
sense? I don't know if that makes
I
sense.
I want to I no, I want to actually I want to remind me to get back to yeah, I've got it written down. I'll talk about the minimizing of the use, but first I want to take on the potency thing. The people, like I said, I've had people on my show that lobby against federal at a federal level against cannabis reform. They also do it at a state level, but they're called Smart Approaches to Marijuana. I'll just say their name in case people are listening after the fact and want to look them up. Um, they're one of the most prominent groups, and they make this point all the time that like this weed is supercharged weed, or it's not your grandpa's weed and stuff like that. And it's like, first of all, it's interesting. Basically, by saying that, you're just trusting marijuana's data.
Right.
Have you noticed that marijuana now is sold, people are looking for the quote unquote highest potency,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's allegations about labs inflating those numbers.
Right.
So I feel like people that, like even yourself, that use data like that should be careful, because it's like you're basically trusting that the cannabis industry is being honest. Now, I want to
No.
be
No.
honest.
Not
I
at
want to be
all.
candid though,
I'm
and
go.
say though that cannabis is definitely better cultivated. But like to say it's any more potent, like I feel like you're giving these cannabis companies too much credit.
And
Like they.
I'm not even going by the companies. I'm going by the users. That's what I'm going by, and they're thrilled with the current situation with the gummies and the potency within. That's exclusively. I am not. I don't believe the marijuana business I picked up early on while in college. The marijuana business is almost exactly akin to the gambling business, and none of them are to be trusted. None of them. So I would never go by their data. It's the same thing if you remember, when gambling was being pushed across the country. Um, how it was being pushed, it seemed, in every state. You need your own casinos. You need your own, horse.
Let's just put it this way. Let's just put it this way. To your point, both alcohol, tobacco, and gambling. I don't know the exact number, but it's like it's something called like the 20-80 rule, where it's like 20% of users make up 80% of the sales, right?
I believe that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so they are very they target people, they get them hooked, and you know, yeah. My point though, and this is what I've been leading up to, is that alcohol and tobacco. Again, I know that. What is your stance on that again? Like,
But
just that it's normal, or
it,
like,
it it's an outlet. It's a highly controlled outlet right now, and it's like the saying, enough. This is the line, and no further. We
yeah,
we could continue. I mean, or if you look at Oregon, they did continue. Why not heroin? Why not meth? And that's the slippery slope that all of us that are in my business that take it seriously, that we all know. We know it's the truth. It's like every heroin user started with marijuana. Not every marijuana user goes to heroin.
yeah. I would only say that with regard to that. I mean, I agree that Oregon was a failed experiment, but I truly believe that the reason that drugs like fentanyl and cocaine powder and heroin exist is because of the what's called the iron law of prohibition. Where, have you heard of that?
No.
It's the idea that the harder you enforce drugs, this is why what you're talking about is true, that the more concentrated forms of any drug become more popular. So think the prohibition of alcohol. Moonshine was super popular because it's easier to put in a bunch of mason jars, and nobody drinks a whole fucking mason jar of moonshine, right?
They
You split
shouldn't.
it into a
We
bunch of
we
drinks.
hope not.
Right, unless you're trying to have a real, yeah. But then think marijuana. Like, it's much easier to traffic these these cartridges, and these edibles, and these extracts, because they don't smell, they're super compact,
Right.
and they're super concentrated. So once again, you don't have to use as much and you still get way high. And
Right.
I'll just use a few more examples really quick. Again, coca. Coca in Peru and everything, they just eat the leaves. But and I would say that maybe we would do that too. But coca is illegal here. So the way that it gets imported into the country is in a concentrated form, cocaine, and the same with heroin. Like I'm not saying the opium dens of China were great back in the day, but I don't think they were like ODing and all the shit that happens from these really concentrated drugs. That I believe they've only become super popular because they're much easier to hide from people like you that used to enforce on the border. Rather, that think about it logistically. Trying to traffic a bunch of marijuana leaf, coca leaf, opium versus a powder, a concentrate, like it just logistically makes sense. You can pack it better and try to avoid your dogs.
The dogs. The dogs.
So, do you get my point there?
I do. I don't know how much, this to just the bottom line is for folks like us that you're going to find now, as was stated before I got booted from the last session, you're going to
Yeah.
find that there's a significant number of officers, especially the younger ones, that can't wait. And it's kind of ironic because even though it could be legalized in their state or even legalized federally, there's no agency that's going to allow them to use it until they retire. You cannot have an officer that comes to work with it in their system on any level. Period.
Do you guys have that with any other, like you mentioned, like I was able to easily get a Xanax and an Adderall prescription. I could probably get more if I really wanted to. Like,
Right.
does law enforcement have any? I know cannabis for sure you can't because of the FFL
Right.
with how scheduled drugs work. But if you have a prescription, like, are you still allowed to be, depending on what it is, are you still allowed to be in law enforcement?
It's going to be agency dependent, and I will tell
Oh, fair
you
enough.
I will tell you that many you will be. And it's a massive problem. It's a massive problem. Um it's something that if I was ever a defendant of something involving an officer, use of force or something, I would definitely be drawing blood. I would have my attorney draw blood for that
Man,
because
that you've
because
brought
it
that up a lot,
it
and that
is
feels like such an invasion of privacy.
well, it
Like,
is, and that's why
I get it in
you got to have a
oh, go ahead.
judge sign off on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Fair enough.
is.
When you're getting clearances and stuff, I guess you probably should be subject to a little bit more scrutiny. Is that your point?
It's not even clearances are more of a minor issue. It's the ability to take someone's liberty
Sure.
and to discharge a firearm.
Right. Right.
That's the top tier of the concerns there.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the whole thing I was leading up to, like I said, because I kind of built it up for a while. I like the alcohol, at least alcohol, and I wanted to say I'm sorry for. It sounds like you've gone through like maybe some serious like in the field experience of having to look, you said a few times, a family, somebody in the eye and say like we can't undo what's been done. So like I know people in law enforcement, and obviously every story is unique, so I'm not going to say in any means I understand, but I wanted to say, like, in a weird way, thank you for your service. I know that might, maybe you not aren't told that often. Usually that's something that
Thank you,
is, but
thank you.
yeah. And I also just wanted to say, like, I'm sorry that you've had to go through those things. That's really
Well,
tough. And I guess my
what it does to you
question,
is it just it. So you can't help the innocence of youth. Whether you're signing up for the military and you're like, yay, I get to have a gun and camouflage and go charge the battlefield. Then you get out there and you're working and you're seeing the nuts and bolts of how it actually works, and you're like, whoa, huh, this isn't a joke. If I don't do my job, my brother might not go home to his family. Well, same principle. You get out there and you're going to save the world, and you have a lot of hopes and high hopes. You're going to protect your community. You're going to do the right thing if you're a good person, if you're the right person for the job. But then the reality starts setting in very fast. That bad things are happening out there, and if you give a damn, your next question is, what can I do to stop this? What can I do to slow it down?
that actually was kind of going to be my next question actually.
Yeah,
So like with alcohol, I want to use alcohol as an example because I feel like you've probably gone through, I hope not, but I'm just going to assume you've probably gone through similar experiences with alcohol where you have to like, maybe sometimes it's both. Maybe it's sometimes they're high and drunk, right? But you've had to,
very
I'm just
frequently.
asking.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And my point, my question and my point is to your point, you just asked, hopefully your next question is how do you end it? And I feel like honestly, they could be better. I'll preface what I'm about to say with this all could be better, but I do think that our public health campaigns are pretty freaking effective. Again, they could be better. But like I'm thinking of like the ads with we all have seen the ads with the person talking with the thing in their throat, or like there's even more ones where they're like missing their jaw and stuff. And then there's the commercials about drunk driving and the last text, and I feel like these are all like really effective public health campaigns that show you. And unfortunately, to your point, I think this is going to be something you might say when I give you the space to respond. Is Cole? How many examples do we have to, or how many lives have to be lost? And I would say hopefully a low number, but if you have more data to point to, is my point. I feel like you can more reliably make a better case against using drugs, right? Because if we just push it all into the shadows and try to pretend it's not happening, I don't feel like kids are gonna, because that's the whole thing right now. The kids are like, oh, like you said, marijuana is not bad. All the adults are lying to us, and I feel like that's a dangerous path to send a young person down.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, my real question is like, do you get where I'm saying? Where it's like and I'll give you the space, the public health. Like you have to be able to point to things in order to make your point. And I'm not saying like let it rip per se, but I do think that decriminalization, or you know, I don't even think legalization is an option. I think decriminalization is something we should look into. But I want to give you the space because I've been kind of going. What do you think about just the idea about data and public health campaigns?
Data is great. The problem is, have you taken a statistics class?
A while ago, and in some ways it still is helpful, but
Right,
it's been a
right,
while. So
right. And we learn. What do we learn? I mean, garbage in, garbage out. Depends who's doing it. I mean, very manipulable.
true.
Um, yeah, my feeling right now is that where we're at for most places, we're in a good space, and we need to make incremental moves. And
Yeah,
and the
and if I could
concern
like
the
just for
concern with
five.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry for cutting you off, but I realized what I really wanted to say is that use for both alcohol and tobacco has fallen over the years. And I would think that if we did similar public health campaigns, that would correspond with cannabis too. And again, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but that was really the bottle of
Yeah,
my
no,
message.
no problem. Alcohol is dropping off. What's the big thing now? Mocktails. That's a big thing that's being pushed right now. That's actually not being pushed. That people are just embracing it. Um, I think it's because we're in a kind of a health kick, especially younger generations, and you start looking at well, alcohol is generally it's poisoning the body, but there's been a design since I'd say around the '90s where marijuana is all natural. Marijuana is the natural alternative, and that's the problem. That is
Organic,
that.
don't panic, right?
I'm sorry.
Organic, don't panic, right?
Correct, correct. I mean, I've heard that. I've had so much thrown at me over the years, whether it was in college or, when we've had the same discussion in college, many, many, many times over. And that's one of the first things thrown out, um, and tobacco, because of all people think of cigarettes. And so they think of the nicotine and all the other additives that have been put in there to make it um, more desirable, more addictive. And, you know, it's good those things are dropping. I don't think it's going to stop though, because of marijuana having that organic or that natural appeal or aura around it. Um, Again, I mean, it's about maintaining. From my perspective, my concern is maintaining an orderly society, a society that you want to be part of, that you want to go out, you want to be in public. You don't want to be concerned. And if you go to these jurisdictions, you go to New York City or you go to the West Coast, folks have problems just walking down the street with their kids, with their children. You know, that's that's not a society we want to really be part of.
Right. Well, hey, I want to, we should maybe do this again sometime. I
100%.
I I gotta head out, but you're cool with me releasing this little conversation as a podcast? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Cool, man. Well, again, we should do this again, and I appreciate just the civil way in which we had this conversation. Like the last one, this is what I will say about the last one. I know I've been pushing it off, like saying, "Nah, it's not worth talking about." This is what I did notice about the last one is that you couldn't get more than 5 words out. Um, so
It's tragic. It's not. That's. I mean, and then smoothing over that we're beyond that. When in many places we're starting to question the decisions that were made. We're already
and
starting
dude,
to.
did you hear? I really feel bad for since if an audience is not listening right now, but there was somebody who literally was screaming at you, bro.
Yeah, and I'm giving you. If it hurt you, that is a verifiable, factual experience that took place. And if that had if that had you reacting that way, if that was your that says more about you than it did the scenario. That it hurt you that bad to have an outburst like that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's that
it
that
was insane. It was like, "Don't you dare fucking off,
and
fuck."
see, I'll tell you, yeah, and that I rarely do I see it like that, but I have had many a. It's amazing to me how near and dear marijuana is to many users. Most, I don't know. The minority, I don't know. But whether I'm going way back in my college years or to present day, what we just witnessed there, it's amazing. If you see a person smoking cigarettes that reacts to you that way, we kind of cock our head sideways and say, "You all right?" If we see a person drinking alcohol that comes at you that way, again, we cock our head and we're like, "You okay, buddy? That's a little too important to you right now." You know, that's maybe we should go to a meeting together or something. I mean, wow, that is a explosive response.
I do agree that it was very explosive. I have no idea who those people were, and I'm just curious before we go, like, do you give them any slack with regard to the idea that, I mean, like you just said, that reality that you described that you said is preferable is a reality that exists in the United States where you do have to hide it in your house and you can't have it in public and you can get in a lot of trouble. And so do you give them any slack or empathy at all with regard to, like, I'm not saying that they should have spoken to you that way, but can you see maybe if they went through an experience where they experienced bad policing, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, how they could maybe get that vitriolic?
I see the vitriol was because of their embracing of the intoxicant. That it was just like I was getting with the alcohol, that the person is so protective of the alcohol that
Right.
they blow up on you. Why they're protective, I think, we wouldn't say that an alcoholic or somebody drinking alcohol is trying to do it, that it's a past law enforcement experience. I mean, they could never, who are they going to talk to and say, well, that crazy cop busted me for being intoxicated walking down the street? Everyone's going to say you shouldn't have been doing that. So it's not about the enforcement aspect that could have done that. To me, what concerns me with that outburst was they need that. How dare anyone go after the intoxicant? How dare you? And that was the outburst. It wasn't about a possible officer encounter in the past or having a hard time getting their hands on it. None of that. It was about, this is my precious. This is my ring. You know, don't you dare, don't you
Right.
dare go there.
Right. I felt that too. And I
Yeah,
mean, to your point, obviously you can tell I'm one of those people that's passionate about the subject and is willing to take some time to talk about it. And I think I'm maybe one of those people you talked about earlier where you said like there are just some people, man, that just really care about this issue. And I am one of those people, as you can tell. I can stay level headed and I have like a core set of principles, you know what I mean, that like I just really think it's about liberty, and
100%.
I get the point of like when smoking in public, even like I don't think you should smoke cigarettes in public, let alone weed. I think you should be able to smoke weed wherever you smoke cigarettes,
Yep,
but I don't think you should be getting in a car and driving. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. And I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, uh,
But I think if you look through my Twitter afterwards, which I saw your investigative person or whatever, so I'm sure maybe you will. You'll see that I do talk about other subjects, but it's mostly drug policy and it's mostly cannabis policy. So I feel like I'm one of those people that you were describing, and it makes me question myself honestly, like why I am so obsessed with the topic. And I think you kind of a light bulb went off when you said my precious, and it's like, dude, there was really a point in time before like weed was legal here in Illinois, where like every time I got weed, I had like anxiety about not having weed because like it wasn't. And I know that sounds like core textbook drug problem, right? it really it's not that I couldn't go without weed, it just kind of sucked. It really was like, bro, I don't you can't buy weed because there's no like store to go. There wasn't a store to go buy weed. Now it's something I just don't even think about. But to your point, if somebody starts talking about it in a certain way where they're talking about maybe repealing it, like I do get a little bit defensive about the idea of somebody taking what I feel like is my liberty.
yeah.
Uh,
And, as if you look back, and I'm sure you have, because most folks who are on the issue look at prohibition and everything else we've done in the past in this country. My concern f- coming, if I was in your shoes, would be that we're going to overreact. We never seem to do anything halfway here. And when we banned alcohol, we were kicking in doors for alcohol. And then what did we do? We did bathtub gin. How many people went blind and died from bathtub gin?
right.
I mean, um, we just can't get it right. We overreact. We go full throttle, it seems like, no matter what we do as a country, as a nation. And that's why I'm saying right now, seems like we're pretty much, and I understand, I don't know anything about Illinois law, but it seems like we're in a fairly sweet spot. I think you're going to find a super, super majority of officers want nothing to do with personal consumption of marijuana. Just do it. Just be you. You know, if I inadvertently, that's why I was saying there was a traffic accident completely unrelated. Nobody's intoxicated on marijuana. And I walk through and it's through the window. Well, now I'm stuck because it's there, it's public, it's in your car. I'm stuck. But I don't think you're going to find a super majority of officers out there that have any interest in kicking in your door for personal use. None. And that misnomer out there, that was being brought up about why serving all this time in prison and all this. I've never seen it. 20 years, I've never seen anyone do hard time for personal use. Did I put someone in prison for a long, long time for marijuana? Yeah, I did. I put a bunch of people in there, but I moved into federal enforcement and we were dealing with border trafficking, which is your semi truck, your airplane, your shipping vessel. We're talking about tons of marijuana. Never, never for a joint, never for a brownie, never for a gummy, never for oil on the tongue, hashish, none of that. Never.
Not prison time, but maybe you get booked or something, right?
Sure, sure, sure. And
But see, that shit sucks, man.
it
That
does
sucks.
suck. It does suck. It does
Doesn't
suck.
it?
But there's folks that it's happening with you're under 21 and you have a pistol. That sucks. How can you
Yeah,
go serve your nation in war, but you can't come home from boot camp and carry a pistol? That
yeah.
sucks too. I mean, there's a lot of things in our laws, and I think these are the nuances that people like you and I wish there were more of us. We could sit down at a table and have these discussions.
Yeah.
That last what we witnessed, that was, you have to take this. It's for the children. It's for the farmers. It cures cancer. And you're like, hold on a second. Hold on. Back up 1 second. You know? No. There's a bigger picture here. And you're trying to sell me perfection. And nothing's perfect. I'm not, it's not, the country's not. So, that was the issue. That was the rub that was happening over there. It's just like, you're gonna take what I give you and keep taking it. But hold on, nope, nope, nope. I'm gonna mute you.
Muted.
Yeah, you're hurting my point of view here. You're making me. And then the outburst, which I heard just a tiny fraction of before I got booted.
Gotcha.
Yeah, good
Well,
conversation though.
yeah.
I followed you.
Thank you.
Yes,
And
sir.
do you? So the person I had to pick up just kind of canceled on me. I was just curious. Since you said you've busted people, have there ever been times like where you kind of like felt felt bad, or do you
No,
did it
N-
always feel like?
no, and here's why: is because um, the generally the way you proceed in that career is you got to do a lot of time on the streets, and you have to do the times where folks have gotten hurt with drugs or alcohol. And so by the time you make detective, you have that behind you and you see the effects. So if you're a good cop, it drives you. You want to do more. Responding to a traffic accident after it already happened, it doesn't feel like you're doing anything. But becoming a detective, becoming an agent, you go on and you feel like you're making a difference because you're
Yeah.
stopping a lot.
Have you ever dealt with or seen like corrupt cops?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's 100% out there. There's folks that get in it, um, you know, for the wrong reasons. They don't know what they're going to do with their lives. Maybe they know somebody that helps them get hired, and they get found out, and fellow cops report them all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, no one hates this. The 50s, the 40s, the 60s, the 70s. Those days are behind us. I never witnessed that where the blue line, the blue brotherhood, or something like that. Never seen that in my 20 years. Never. We will back each other if we look at the scenario. If the media is pushing something that our training, our policy, our procedure is exactly it does exactly what the officer in question did. Um, but when it comes to someone stealing from a person who got in a traffic stop, or stealing from a house, or just corrupt activity, officers will report another officer in a heartbeat. And in fact, you can get the misnomer is you'll get promoted down the line for being that kind of person. You will get promoted. You will come out on the high end of that if if you're in a good agency, which is, I'd say, 95% of agencies out there. The ones that would be concerned to me are tiny little village agencies, tiny, which most of
Yeah.
us have no encounter with whatsoever, except if you're maybe lost off the interstate or something. But you know, large cities, medium large, medium small, you're going to get promoted. You successfully report an officer for corruption as an officer, you'll be promoted. You'll benefit
Damn.
because the chief does not, or the sheriff or the commissioner does not want that reputation. They got to live with that. This is and one of the most frustrating things is there's far too many of us in public service, whether you're teaching or law enforcement, whatever you did, we retire and we say, I'm done. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do interviews. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to know. I might talk about it with a close friend, family member, but what you and I are doing right now, they have no interest in. None. And
Yeah.
so that story remains untold. It's kind
That's a
of
shame.
it is.
That's
It is.
I've had that experience. I've had law enforcement on my show, but I've had several just be like, "Nah, I don't want to talk about it." It's
It is.
like,
It's
okay,
it's so frustrating. I'm thankful that I have the energy, I have the ability, But I'm also thankful that throughout my career, I was deeply, deeply, deeply invested. I always wanted to know why. Why are you telling me to do this? Why is this the law? Why are you doing this? Why are they doing this? It wasn't, I would do my job, I would execute the mission at hand. But then when I had a chance to reflect, I would always say, why? And I would go to people with 20, 30, 40 years experience. And I'd say, why? Why are we doing this? I don't understand. And there's too many cops. I'd say 50% of officers out there have no interest on why. Why do you do it? Because why not? I don't know. They don't care. They do their job, they're fair, they're good, and that's it.
In your experience, have you ever come across anybody that can actually conceal, like hide things from a canine unit? They're
Um Canines have all sorts of levels of experience just like a human. So nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible. And we know it.
What do you mean by that? Do you think that like an odor proof container is impossible?
It's it's possible. I mean, it's possible to have something odor proof. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. We've had shipments that we knew were coming, and it got past two sets of dogs over the course of two different entry points, and you know,
Huh.
and then dogs are no different than humans. Some are better than others.
Yeah.
It's just
Some days are better than others too,
yeah,
huh?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I only
yeah.
asked that because there was a recent Illinois Supreme Court case. Maybe you might find this interesting, where the Supreme Court ruled the cops can't search a car based on the smell of smoked or burnt cannabis, but they can search the car if it smells like raw cannabis.
Huh?
Do you know the difference between that smell?
I don't know if I could.
Now they train. They say they train, so maybe officers nowadays, especially
Maybe.
since it's legal, I bet you they could literally just buy some and be like, "All right, here's what it smells like," and then they could literally light it on fire and be like, "And that's what it smells like
And
when it's
again,
burnt."
personal use. I don't think you're going to find a bunch out there that are rip roaring trying to get a hold of you.
I mean,
It's
I have had a couple. So this recent episode I did on the Supreme Court ruling, you'll be able to see these defense attorneys' names, and they've come on my show a few times. And one of the things they defend, they're criminal defense attorneys, and one of the things they defend for specifically is cannabis in Illinois, because actually specifically because of this issue. There are some other issues as well, still in Illinois, but just specific to this issue, like they say that a lot of people get in trouble, and basically, like law enforcement is still able to seize your vehicle and search your vehicle if they just say, "I smell cannabis," and even if you have it, even if you're like honest and you're like, "Yeah, it's right here. I just got back from the dispensary, but I'm not smoking it. You can see it's unopened." Uh, they can say, "Well, you're supposed to have it in an odor-proof container."
huh. Good luck with that.
Yeah, right. Um, so I just that's why I was asking you, because I was like, because after this ruling, the Illinois State Police issued a statement that said, or actually it was before the ruling. They said, pending the ruling, we may start to train more dogs on the smell of cannabis. And now they definitely have the green light to do that, because if you can detect the raw odor of cannabis, you can search, right? So
Right.
that's why I was asking, like, is there any such thing as an odor proof container? Because like, honestly, if there was, I'd buy it just so that I don't have to like worry about. It's not like I'm driving all the time with weed, but occasionally, yeah, I got to go buy some weed, so on the way home there is weed in my car.
Right. Right.
But
I'm not aware of any, but a lot of these things we don't learn of them until we learn of them. We're
fair,
we're
yeah.
we're we're on the end trying to uncover it, whereas the ones that are trying to conceal it, they're the ones ahead of us.
Right.
So
Well, to your point, I feel silly for even asking this question now. if your dog doesn't detect on it, you have to send them on their way. But I guess you did say there are trucks you were expecting and they you didn't detect on it.
Correct.
That's
Correct. I
crazy.
mean,
Yeah.
a dog again is like a human.
Right.
You
Right.
know, I mean, I have stood. I have had a partner before who helped me on a traffic stop, and we walked to the back of the car, and I said, "Did you see it?" And he said, "See what?" You didn't see it? He said, "I didn't see it." I said, "Go up there and look again." And he looks in the window, and there's a pistol. So you know, dogs are just like us. I mean, they not not in every aspect, but I mean, you're gonna have dogs that are very capable, and you're gonna have dogs that are young and still learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, super interesting conversation.
Yeah,
I
great
really,
conversation.
I really appreciate you coming on and talking. And uh, now that I know, that you've got a really interesting background, I'll definitely think on some things. And actually, we don't even have to talk about drug policy. Like, I just honestly like talking with people, about law enforcement itself. And the whole subject is fascinating because of what you guys have been through. That's why I said earlier,
Yeah,
thank you for your service. So.
absolutely, absolutely. It was my pleasure, and I wish I could do more of it. I wish I was able to do more now.
Yeah.
But and it's kind of down to working in politics, and I think there's value in this. I think there's value in these discussions. I think there's value in the social media when we can do these kind of discussions. Um, even though the last conversation you and I were part of, witness to, it failed. I think there's got to be people that were listening that uh, looked at that and said, "Hold on now. I mean, they're just trying to offer an alternative point of view. Why are you shutting them down? Why are you screaming?"
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's actually, if you saw I had my hand raised, I was just gonna say that, and then somebody else said that. They were like,
Okay.
"Just let him finish his point." Like, he hasn't even finished his point. But yeah, that was pretty
I
crazy.
mean, we were told to raise our hands. I raised my hands. I start talking. I get muted. Start talking. I get mute. I mean, that's good. That shows folks that there is an agenda underfoot.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's good.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what these
why I
all
reached
do.
out to you, and that's how. So in a weird way, as crazy as that conversation was, it was a good thing because that's how we connected.
There you go. And that's a beautiful thing. That's how we share ideas. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks there that are upset with me right now. They're like, he doesn't want anything, and that's clearly not the case. I'm 100% behind medical. I don't think I've ever met an officer that's not behind medical legalization,
Yeah.
and not even like cracking down like they are with opioids with marijuana. Just the way it is right now, which is doctor shop and get your prescription. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we're for the VA doing it. We're, I've never heard one. I know thousands and thousands of officers of all different experience levels, and I've never heard one that said it shouldn't be available for medical. And again, not cancer, not you know horrible MS or anything like that. Where we're talking about anxiety, simple things. Just get it on the record. That's it.
Yeah. Hey, I
You know,
did. I did have one last thing. Have you heard of hemp? Like,
hemp. Yes.
the whole thing about what hemp is doing right now in America
Yeah.
with the products that you can just you can literally send weed through the mail. I actually just got drinks today. They have
Cool.
50 milligrams of THC each. But what's crazy is what they do is they just put a piece of paper in there that says hey, law enforcement, not necessarily addressed to law enforcement, but it's for the people that are opening the packages, that says this is hemp, and it's federally legal. And it's just crazy to me, man, because I feel like in all your experience you never would imagine a day where you open up a box and oh, well, they just tell me it's hemp, so I guess I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Right.
Isn't that crazy?
Hmm.
It's so crazy. So anyways, any thoughts on that before we go? Just because I'm curious, if you've been cooking on that at all. Like,
Again, I mean, people are finding a lot of relief from hemp,
sure,
CBD, and that's a good thing.
but isn't
We don't
that,
need people.
I hear you on that. Isn't that wild though, that just like I'm getting quote, I don't like it when people say this, but quote unquote, you said it earlier, intoxicating products. Like I'm getting potent products through the mail and I'm able
Yeah.
to do it. And they just put a piece of paper in that says it's hemp.
Yeah. Well, and that, I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'll try to visualize it this way.
Sure.
How stereos used to have those graphic equalizer slides.
Hmm.
That's it. That's what I'm getting at with policy is let's tune it in. Slide this up, let's try this. Okay. But this wholesale, let's get rid it, make it all. Make let's it's all good. It's all beautiful. It's for the babies. It's for cancer. It's for farming. That's what concerns me. If we want to tune it in together and sit down and have these discussions and policies, let's do it.
Yeah, and you've
Let's
tried to,
do it.
you've made that point a few times. Do you mean by that like this state by state experiment thing? Like you're saying that's
Sure.
what we should continue to
Sure.
do, not this,
Sure.
not a federal approach, is what you're saying.
That sounds great. Yes. I mean, get it to because on the state local level, change can happen rapidly.
Yeah,
If we and that's exactly why I'll tell you. That's exactly why the marijuana industry, which was on the last channel, that's why they want the federal wholesale legalization because they know that it's slow. They know it took a while to get to this point, and they know that once it's legalized wholesale federally, it'll take a long, long, long time to go back the other way. And that's
hemp is a good example of that, man. They've been talking about shutting it down, and it's been, I mean,
it's slow. It's
2018.
designed to be slow.
Yeah.
Our founders designed the federal side of it to be slow. And they know in the process, billions and billions and billions of dollars are involved. And that's why get it open and it'll take decades. And there's billions. Our children's children will be millionaires if we are in the marijuana business. See, isn't it funny how like even California, they really, even though it's legalized on many, many levels, they still don't want us growing it in our house. Isn't that interesting? It's for the business.
Yeah,
Florida's last attempt,
right.
it wasn't about personal growing, it was about marijuana Inc. growing. So it's like folks, yeah, you're doing this on liberties. I hear you, but the ones that are backing this are not for you and me to grow it.
Brother.
They want to
Amen
be the
to
ones
that.
that supply it to you.
Amen to that.
Right? I mean, it's just it's funny, and those are the things we should have covered in that last discussion, but we could never get there because we were getting it shoved down our throat. This is the answer to all your problems. It's kind of like the old thing back in the day. You know, Uncle Casey's miracle serum. Like
Yeah.
the this is going to cure everything. But no, great discussion, brother, and I appreciate you doing this. I really do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll be in touch. Thank you for
Yeah, we
the
will.
follow. And yeah, looking forward to the next time we chat. Maybe you'll have
I'm
hype loaded next time.
I'm gonna go get some pizza.
Cool. Cheers.
Later, man.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.